Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. It is May 9th. We're here for a work session of the City Council. We'll begin with public comment on non-agenda items. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the council this evening can go ahead and raise their hand on Zoom or come forward to the podium if you're in the room. Okay, seeing none, we're going to close public comment period and move into our first work session, which is the City of Laramie Insurance Service Office Public Protection Classification. Chief Johnson, welcome.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, thanks for giving us this opportunity tonight to discuss the study that we had done with you. We'll be doing a short presentation and we'll have some time for questions, I hope. We were contacted last fall regarding launching this study here. Typically, they used to do them once every 10 years. Now they're striving for once every 4 years. COVID kind of delayed them on this one. But it begins with they contact the fire chief, informing us they will be conducting this analysis, and they ask for data points. Those data points we turn over for them initially are in regards to GIS. They want to get mapping of the city. They want to know where all the hydrants are. So we provide them a lot of information before they even get on site. And so it started last fall. They were on site last winter, and then they published this report. They sent a copy to myself and to the mayor, and that's how the process starts. So let's see. So there we go. So the ISO, which stands for Insurance Services Office, is an organization. It's a private organization. Their home base is out of New Jersey. They've been in this business since 1971, providing statistical analysis of fire departments and fire suppression capabilities. They do underwriting. Basically, they develop their numbers, and then companies can call them and subscribe and get numbers. We receive several calls a year from insurance agents asking what our ISO number is because they're trying to insure properties and whatnot. They do both analysis for commercial and for private property. Let's see. They really only look at the department's ability to suppress a structure fire. They do realize that departments do a lot more than that these days. They realize there's a lot of EMS, there's wildland fires, there's hazardous materials. They do look at hazardous materials to some degree, but they really look at our ability to suppress a structure fire, and they're looking at only the first alarm. So what's first out the door, what we can throw at a fire, how many people, and basically how many GPM we can get on a fire. Based on that, they come up through their formulas, they issue a grade and on a percentage, and that percentage falls into a classification. The ISO evaluates our data and issues us a grade. The grade will be between 1 and 10, 1 being exemplary fire service, 10 being basically nothing at all in the community. Grades 1 through 8 pretty much have some component of a dispatch, a fire department, and a water supply. You get into 8B, 9, and 10, those are missing some component. So we won't really talk about those because we're up in the you'll see we're rated at a 2/2X. We'll talk about that. The grades are dependent on several factors. The main ones they look at is the needed fire flow. That's a big one. That's really the ability to produce the amount of water that through their calculations that they need at a fire scene. And that's closely related to the water supply. So those are kind of one and the same, separated them out just because the water supply does include your hydrants and things like that, the inspection program of your hydrants. So then another one they look at is emergency communications, and the other one they look at is the fire department. So they grade percentages is 10% of the total score is dedicated to our ability to dispatch our resources out. 50% of the total score is the analysis of the fire department, and 40% is looking at the water department. Couple notes. I got to catch up. So I do these PowerPoints and I get off track of myself. I get to talking. And, as I mentioned, it only is talking about reducing property loss from structure fires. They're not looking at simultaneous incidents, and what they're talking about on that is our ability to launch for the next fire. So simultaneous incidents does affect our initial response. So when I do a staffing with budget tomorrow night, I'll be talking about this more in depth. But so we're affected by, so if we have 2 ambulance calls going on at the same time, and then we hit a structure fire, that does affect the number of people that initially respond on the structure fire. So that's how that one affects us, but they don't look at like, okay, we're already on one, and what's the next one? So they look at one, and properties up to 3,500 GPM is what they're rating us on. It provides us, it's also, no one likes to be evaluated. I mean, you know, it's tough to come in and be questioned, and it's like, well, you need to be doing this and that. But it's really an opportunity for us to take a look at a third party outside, taking a look at our organization and saying, hey, this is the areas you can improve on, this is where you're doing good. So it is a valuable tool for us. We can use it, the information, learn to, hey, we need to pick it up here, we need to make maybe budget requests in this area, we're doing good here, let's maintain this. So when you study, we go through the study pretty thoroughly within our divisions to see where we can do better. So that's pretty important for us. The data on insurance losses typically indicate the, you know, the departments scoring higher are typically having less fire loss. There are instances where you have those catastrophic fires with high winds and stuff that move through a community, but overall, nationwide, their data, and they're evaluating over 39,000 communities. Their data shows that better scores is lower fire loss, and then that's why it's related to the insurance industry. So one thing I want to talk about is, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, we do get penalized on what they call divergence. And really what divergence is they assign a score to, and they look at 2 things when they're looking at divergence. They're looking at our water supply system, and they're looking at our firefighting capabilities. So if you have a water supply system that's ACEs, scores, you know, perfect, and you don't have adequate fire service, that's inequity in being able to respond and deal with that. Vice versa, if you got the best staffed and equipped fire service, but they get there and their water is unreliable and not there, then you have that gap there. So there is a divergence score that they take credit away the wider the divergence is. And we'll talk about that in a later slide toward the end about how we historically our divergence is narrowing and we're doing a lot better there. So pretty happy about that. When we look at communities, I don't know if you can read that. So I broke it out, and it's in the report that you have, grades 1 or classification 1 through classification 10. Grade was a lot shorter to write than classification, so I used the word grade up there everywhere. So there was 388 communities had across the nation at a 1, and then there was 1729 at a 2. That's where Laramie's is at a 2 right now, and we're within a percentage point of being in a 1. So we're really scratching the door of a 1. We're close, very close. Grade 3 was 5,585. Grade 4 was 6,900. And you can read, I'm not going to read them all, but it goes through the all the classifications, and those are 2020 statistics. So my guess is that they were published before COVID. COVID put them behind on stuff. They'll probably update this when they get caught back up again. As I said, the city of Laramie rating was a 2/2X. So there used to be just one single number they'd give you. Then they gave you a number that was a split number. One was like where you had hydrants and where your houses were, and the other one was where there was vacant land, say, in the city. This is the newest rating system. So the 2 stands for properties within 5 road miles of a fire station or 1,000 feet of a hydrant. And then we do have annexed property that's undeveloped that doesn't have the hydrant system into them yet. If and when they get developed, I'm sure the hydrant systems will go in. But 2X is properties beyond 1,000 feet, but still within 5 miles of a station. So that's how that split rating works. How we scored. Communications, so these are on points or percentages. We got 9.44 out of 10. Fire department was 41.51 out of 50. Water supply was 33.68 out of 40. We were lost 0.24 points in divergence, and our community risk reduction is, I call it extra credit because that's above and beyond. It's 5.5 points that can be added to 100, and we got 4.99 out of 5.5. So we'll talk a little bit more about that too. I want to go into benchmarks where we can address. So there's so many data points, and even the report that we get, the summary report. I'm not going to go through every single one of them. I mean, you get a 6 out of 6 on ladders, or a 5 out of 5 on reserve ladder, or something like that. It's like, what I want to do is point out where I think we can improve, where we can pick up some points. I think there's some areas where we may lose some points in the future too. I also will be introducing you to the key division heads in my department that in our department that are very integral to providing data and managing these areas. So with me today, I have the operations chief, Kevin Lamb, have the training chief, Gus Stoneham, and I have our fire marshal and division chief of fire prevention, Dennis Johnson. So when we go through this slide, they'll be coming up and talking about their division, where they're at, what we're doing good, and where we can improve on that. I do want to talk about the deployment analysis, and that's the, then I'll start turning it over to division heads. So under deployment analysis, that's really looking at properties within 1.5 miles, a pumper 1.5 miles of a station, and a ladder truck 2.5 miles of a station. So as things get built out, as things get, that's where when you start looking at the need to build, say, a Station 4, population growing, that kind of thing, that's where that number may suffer a little bit because properties get added, and we don't add a fire station every time a neighborhood opens up. So that's one we got to keep an eye on. The Clark Street Viaduct made longer trips into West Laramie for our ladder truck, so I'm trying to investigate on how that looks. We do have one ladder, we do have the backup aerial, but it's not considered a truck company, but we do have 2 aerial capabilities. So those are things I'm looking at under the deployment analysis, and there's a lot of data that goes into deployment analysis. So I'm going to start introducing you to our division heads, and they can talk about their division. So I'd like to introduce to you Kevin Lamb. He is the shift commander on C shift and our head of operations.
Thank you.
Welcome. It's good to see you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of council. I'm Kevin Lamb, as Chief mentioned. I'm the operations chief. Operations division in the fire department is responsible for all of the stuff that makes a fire department work. I'm talking about facilities, i.e. our fire stations and training facility, our apparatus, which are our fire engines and ladder trucks, the equipment that goes within those apparatus or within the station, and also the people that work within the department. That is the purview of the operations division. It's quite a bit of things to handle. Particular to this ISO report, a couple of things that were pointed out when the agent was here to collect his data. I walked with this gentleman throughout our fire stations. We did an inspection of a pumper, and he looked in every compartment looking for axes and ladders and fans and salvage covers and so on and so forth. So it was a very detail-oriented dig into the data. In addition to the data that Chief mentioned, we provided ahead of time about how many calls we had been on, how many people we have, what does our call volume look like in percentages. As we dug through all of this different data, a couple of things that came to light from operations point of view is the number of people that we have working at the fire department. As you dig into your report, you can see in our personnel scoring, we scored 10 and change out of a possible 15. What that correlates really is the need for more firefighters on shift every single day in order to meet the needs of our community. Okay, that's what it basically boils down to. One of the other things that was pointed out to, and Chief mentioned it briefly a little bit ago with the deployment analysis, is that broader view of looking at, as our community grows, the ability for having fire stations in the right area to serve our community, being timely and closely located, is another thing that was pointed out in this particular report. Yeah, I've been involved in several different ISO assessments over my career. I've got 22 years and change across my career, and I've been involved in several of these. And I am very happy with the production and the progress that we are making in this particular report as a third-party lens, looking at our department and our city and our ability to take care of our citizens. And I appreciate the fact that they have an opportunity to look at how can we get better. Okay. That's about what I have for the Operations Division. I stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councilor Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. Just curious, on the ISO inspection, were you aware that the individual was coming? Because you talked about, looking at all the different departments and on the
Yes,
fire truck and everything like that, so that would make a big difference, wouldn't it?
Yes, Honorable Mayor, Councilman Gabriel, yes, we were very aware, we were well scheduled into what data was needed ahead of time and then when the agent was going to be arriving, and he made a good appointment with us to make sure that we were present and able to provide the data that he needed. There was a little bit of follow-up that happened via email and phone calls after that, but the majority of the report when the agent was present was delivered that very day. It was a long day. Yeah.
Councilor Newman.
Can you tell me how many firefighters you think you need so we can have a better score?
Oh boy, Honorable Mayor, Councilman Newman, you're putting me on the spot there. And to be honest, I believe that some information will be coming, not to dodge the question, but I believe that there are some studies in place right now that are going to be arriving in the coming months that may give you a much more accurate picture. I can tell you our minimum staffing number has been 11, and we've been living with that for a couple of years now. It's been very challenging. I know you are all aware of our staffing challenges with long-term injuries and departures and whatnot. I know that 11 is not enough, if that answers your question.
Absolutely.
I don't know what that ceiling number looks like, but 11 is not enough to get the job done at our current workload.
Thank you. Council members, any other questions? Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. Let's suppose that you became fully staffed. What is and right now our rating is somewhere in the 10 to 11 range. What is as high as we could get fully staffed, potentially? I don't think we can hit 15, but because we don't have the equipment and all that, but as with our equipment, ladder trucks, everything that we have fully staffed, where do you think we would go, and what would that do to our ISO rating?
So we are, Honorable Mayor, Councilman Shumway, we are knocking on the door of a Class 1 right now. We're just within less than a percentage point of being in the 90th percentile, which equals a Class 1 rating for the ISO purposes. We are short 4 points just in the personnel module of that entire report. So if we were to upstaff to say a number higher than 11, I think that individually by itself would push us into that 90th percentile in that Class 1 rating. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, it does. And then this follow-up, should we get into Class 1, how much would that reduce the insurance premiums that the citizens pay and that the city and businesses pay in Laramie?
Honorable Mayor, Councilman Shumway, I don't know the answer to what the number is between Class 2 and Class 1 about what a business owner will pay in their insurance premiums. Looking at the scale, though, I would expect it to be less than what they are paying currently as a Class 2. When they report to their individual insurance company, our city, our fire department, we are a Class 2. Their insurance agent comes back and says, you are paying X amount. If they were to report the next year, we are now a Class 1, I would expect that agent would reduce that rate, and now you're paying the Class 1 rate.
One more. Have we ever hit 1?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Great questions, Councilor. Any other questions, Council? Mr. Lamb, are there any other parts sort of under your purview in operations that, I mean, you mentioned staffing specifically, but are there any other sort of like glaring needs in operations?
Honorable Mayor, that's a very good question. And as we look through the report and the time that I spent with the agent, it was obvious and evident to me that in the rubric that the agent used and what he looked at, it was evident that the efforts that this council and previous councils have made, and the fire department in turn in budget requests and whatnot, we've always been very well supported in having cutting edge equipment, whether that be apparatus, whether that be individual pieces of equipment that are manipulated through the operations chief and so on and so forth through the fire department. There weren't a lot of areas that were like, oh no, we don't have very good fire trucks. Boy, it would be really great if we had better fans or something like that. Those individual items really didn't pose a problem in this report for us. So that's kudos to, like I said, this council, previous councils for being supportive of our needs as we come to ask. We don't ask very often, and usually our ask is very expensive, but when it does come, that has been fulfilled and is much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Council, any other questions? Councilor Pierce.
Yeah, thanks. I was going to save this for Chief Johnson, and please correct my memory, but for some reason I think we've had this discussion in one of my previous years, and were we at a 3 and then moved to a 2? Was that your, because I remember, okay, thank you. Okay, all right, well, I'm just jumping ahead then, so thanks.
Yeah. Honorable Mayor, Councilwoman Pierce, over my career, our ISO rating has steadily improved. I started in 2000. Chief Johnson started before that. During his career, our ISO score has always improved in the continuum that I've been here.
Great, and so now we're just knocking the door on that number 1, basically.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Newman. Go ahead.
Will you just thank all your guys for all the hard work that they put in and all the overtime that they put in? I look at those reports and I just want to pass that on to those guys, if you would do that for us.
Honorable Mayor, Councilman Newman, I would be happy to. It'll be much appreciated on their side.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Okay, Honorable Mayor, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Okay, the next part of the report, Shift Commander Gus Stone's with us, and he'll talk about our training effort. Training is one of the areas within the fire department they rate, so he'll come up, take the...
Welcome, Mr. Stoneham.
Good evening, thank you. One of the things I just wanted to talk about, we have a few areas that we do in the training division, and one of them, when I got promoted, we were kind of archaic in how we tracked all of our training hours, and that's really what ISO is looking for, is tracking training hours and doing a good job of being able to pull those reports out and those numbers, so we can truly get like a good number of how many hours people are getting for their training. So what I did was I got a program for us to truly track that, and it's pretty nice because it gives them a bar scale of where they're at in their year in training. So with that being said, one of the things that we do is company training, and each firefighter in the organization has to get about 16 hours of training each month. So that's quite a bit of training. So it equates to about 2 hours of training every day that they're on shift. So Right now, we're working a 24-hour period or a 48-hour period, so they're getting 4 hours. They need to maintain 4 hours of training every tour that they come to work. So that's why they're out the training center all the time and doing the reps, and as well as just staying in their own district and getting training, and those things also count for that. So this does not count EMS training. So this is firefighting specific training. So I just want to clarify that. So on top of what they have to do, 4 hours is just for fire, and then any additional is their EMT. And there's a tremendous amount of hours training for their EMS jobs as well. So I just want you to point that out. One of the things that we were short on, and I just want you to know we got a 25 out of 25 on that score. So we did really well in that section. So we get our training hours in on a day-to-day basis. Where we were short was the facilities and use. As you know, we were down a building for quite a while while we got a new training facility rebuilt. So that kind of pulled back a little bit. And then the other thing that kind of pulled back a little bit was COVID. However, they said that they didn't deduct that from our score. Just because they knew COVID was social distancing and all those kinds of things, so they didn't truly dock us. However, we could have improved at going to a facility and getting more training hours in. So what that means is each firefighter needs to get about 18 hours per year at a structure-related incident. So those would include forcible entry, any live fire, evolutions or anything like that. So that's where those facility use really come in handy, because we can only pull so much hose in a neighborhood or flow water in a neighborhood, or really get our good bang for the buck for firefighting skills is at a training facility. The other thing where we've upped our game is classes for officers. Each officer also additionally, so all these other ones are additional. So if you're promoted to an officer, you need to get 12 hours of continuing education, either on or off site. And we were a little bit short there, but one of the things that you've all seen is we have a new leadership development program, and that was the very first time for us for this year. So I think those kinds of courses and things will really help bolster those numbers up for us. So next year will be even higher. We had our new driver and operator training. We knock that out of the park every year. It's because it's kind of easy to train that in a sense, because everybody needs to learn how to drive and they need to know how to pump, and guys are always interested in doing that, and there's a lot more opportunity to do that style of training. So we always knock that one out of the park every year. Where we struggle a little bit, though, is existing driver and operator training. So our old salty equipment operators are like, I don't need it. I know that already. So it's trying to get those guys back in the training, and just more specific training for those promoted individuals. That's what that's where we can have room for improvement. But I also feel like we have room for improvement in documentation, more so than the training itself, because I think they do a lot of teaching, so they know their stuff. It's just documenting it. So one of the other spots is hazardous materials training. We were short on that one, and this is 6 additional hours of training each month. And so that would give us maximum credit there. We were short in that area, and I think that was, again, just a documentation error on our side. We weren't doing a good job of keeping track of where we were at, doing our hazmat-related topics. But really, we should be getting about 4 hours of training every quarter, and we'd hit that one really well. One of the other things is we're working on Pro Board certification for Hazmat Tech, and that puts us on a 3-year recertification cycle. So it'll start forcing some of this training on hazmat, and so that's another change that I've implemented in this past year, and so we'll be able to stay on top of that stuff a lot better. And then recruit training, we knock that one out of the park every year again, because when they come online, we send them to an academy, and they get their 240 hours of recruit training in a specified period, whether it's 4 or 12 weeks. It just kind of depends on the academy and the amount of individuals that are training. So that's an annual 240 hours for a new firefighter. But again, like I said, we get that done in less than 12 weeks. and then they're online, so. So that's all I have for the training division. And are there any questions?
Thank you. Council members, any questions on training? Perfect. Oh, Councilor Shumway.
This is probably a general question. Does the training and capabilities of the airport and also the rural fire departments affect our ISO score at all?
Honorable Mayor and
That's
Councilor
voted for
Shumway,
the
yeah, I
chief.
don't know how to answer that one, so I was gonna say.
Well, Mayor, Councilor Shumway, it does not. The rural gets their own ISO score. It's independent of our jurisdiction, and the airport structures are within our response area, but airport firefighting is not part of this evaluation. So.
Thanks, sir.
Council members, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, the next person I'd like to talk about their division, invite to the microphone, is our fire marshal and division chief, Dennis Johnson. He's going to talk to you about fire prevention activities, and his division spills over into community risk reduction, so I'll have him talk about that. And he is probably also the most appropriate person to talk to you about the needed fire flow and available water, that kind of thing. Their division deals with that quite a bit. So,
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Johnson, welcome.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and council members. So I'll do just brief and summary of what my office takes care of and stuff. Community risk reductions falls under my privy. We do code analysis or code enforcement and prevention, all the code work. We do the fire life safety education type stuff, and so I'll address that a little bit, and fire investigation program. So along those lines, we do a lot of program management with very little people. So we also do fire investigations for the community and pre-planning and all that stuff, and that all plays part of the ISO process. With the pre-planning of the fire inspections and stuff like that, that goes hand in hand for businesses. With the last couple of years with COVID and stuff like that, we were elected to step back and let the businesses social distance. So anyway, so that we took a pretty good hit on that. So we scored a 3.6 out of 12, so which was a significant hit for us. Within my office, concerning like community risk reduction and stuff like that, we actually had that staffed at one point. We lost that position, and so we absorbed that back into my office again. That covers a lot of stuff like your public education and going out and making sure that we are trying to identify hazards in the community and target those. And so within my office, we have 2 full-time staff, and thanks to you, we upped a provisional position to a .8 position, and it's much appreciated. Let's see here. I'll get into some of the other areas that we kind of lacked in. My office, for the most part, did really well on the survey. We got dinged on personnel. That was our biggest thing in our office. And a lot of, like I said, it correlates back to some of the things we can offer the community. So our staffing, we got scored at 2.77 out of 8. So it's just, we can only do so much with that few of people. So it was our, let's see here. Let me regain my thoughts here. So let's go back to a little bit on personnel. Fortunately and unfortunately, we have a staff member that's injured. And so in the last few months, we've actually been out in the community a whole lot more and been able to accomplish a bunch of this. But during this time, we didn't have that. And unfortunately, we'll be, as soon as that individual is capable to go back to shift work, we'll lose that position as well. So, okay. Let's see here. So some of our other areas that we address is the public safety. We go into the schools district. We have a program where we teach little kids fire safety, just all kinds of stuff. It's a fun little program that we get to do, and this last year was the only time that we got to do that in the last couple of years. So, but we do send our staff to training in Laughlin, Nevada, and they've been asked to come out and do a presentation on for the national type stuff. So that's quite an honor. So, as I stated, like I said, pretty much we hit all of our marks except for personnel. So is there any questions?
Excellent. Council members, any questions? Councilor Doherty.
I just have a thank you about training kids. My house burned down when I was 10, and my brothers were trying to be heroes and opened up it was kind of like a cubby hole, and they opened it up and helped that area. And, we didn't know anything about stop, drop, and roll. Everybody was safe, but not because of anything we did. We just got lucky. So when I think about how dumb we were back then, a while ago, so I think it's really important to teach kids that, and I hope that maybe between the fire department and our utilities department, maybe we could help people understand safe ways to keep their water lines from freezing, because people do some kind of scary things to keep their water line from, anyway. So anyway, thank you for that work. I just think it's really makes a big difference. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other questions, comments? I just was going to add one comment, I suppose. You mentioned sort of stepping back a little bit during COVID, and that sort of affected our scores.
Yeah.
And, I tend to think, and I don't want to speak for the council, but I tend to think that is absolutely the right move. Whether or not we make it to a 1 because of that doesn't matter much to me in sort of the grand picture. So just by way of a note, I just wanted to say I think that was a wise choice regardless of where that left us, and that while we might all be excited to reach for a 1, not at the expense of you all or the residents. Yeah. So thank you.
Okay. Honorable Mayor and council members, like Chief Johnson did say, I'm familiar with the water distribution system because part of my duties also is to go out and test these. They give us a list of hydrants that they would like to be tested prior to the evaluator coming here. He did give us the opportunity to go back and retest some of them because you can test within 1,000 feet of the hydrant that they selected off of that. So are there any questions concerning our water system?
Councilor Doherty.
Yeah, so when I see the fire truck and the hose shooting water way out like on Buford Street at that hydrant, was that testing that was a while ago, maybe last summer before. Was that to test the hydrant or to train the staff or something else?
Honorable Mayor, Councilman.
When there isn't a fire.
Yeah, so sometimes it is training, sometimes but a lot of times, the way the testing typically goes is a couple individuals go out and you have to have several hydrants picked out on the same loop. You test one and you measure the drop of pressure, and then we have a program that we can use to calculate the projected flow at with a residual of 20 GPM, which is 20, yeah, PSI. So residual, because we can't go below 20 PSI on our system. So it could have been training, it could have been just us out there testing, so.
Councilors, any other questions about the water system? Was our, during this practice, was our water system sufficient? Did it keep up to a level that you would expect, or that they would expect, I guess is better?
No, we actually lost a little bit with our water.
Okay.
And some of that has to do with some of the old infrastructure that we have in city limits. I mean, it's kind of hard to overcome some of that. So I think, let me see here. And we're working on it. I mean, with the infrastructure that's going in on down 3rd Street and all that stuff, the water department is working on replacing some of those lines. It just takes time and a whole lot of money. So I think we dropped. No, I was looking at the. Hold on a second. A bunch of paperwork.
Just take your time.
As you can tell, public speaking is not my favorite thing.
Oh, you are doing just fine.
The water supply system there was a 40 points available, and we scored at 33.68. So a lot of that has to do with the amount of water that they're recommending. Like their flow, they prefer to have 3,500 GPM at any given site where they have selected for us to do hydrant flows. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Councilors, any other questions? Okay. Councilor Shumway.
In the past, we've had areas that had an insufficient fire flow. Have we been able to bring up all the areas within the city limits to where there's a sufficient fire flow at this time?
Honorable Mayor and Councilman Shumway, we haven't. There's certain areas of town that residential areas, some of the downtown areas, we have a lot of lines that are insufficient at this time. So, yeah.
Thanks. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Chief Johnson, back to you.
Okay. It's time to kind of wrap up the presentation. So our public protection classification did a little research in the history back on our old scores. In 1988, we were Class 3, scoring 72.13%. In 1998, we dropped to a 71.62%, still rated a Class 3. 2012, so they're looking at back data, but if you remember in 2010, we opened up Station 3, so that helped out a lot with the score, but they looked back at some back time too, so it didn't really capture all that yet. It was a 3/9, so that's when they first started doing split classifications. We were still a Class 3, undeveloped land was rated a Class 9. They looked at how they were rating that, and that wasn't right. So when we had our 2016, we were rated an 88.76, Class 2/2X. That was our first Class 2 rating we ever achieved in our department. Then the 2X is covering properties that are, if you remember, it's within 5 miles of a station, but more than 1,000 feet from a hydrant. And this study goes into effect June 1st of this year, and we've increased to 89.38. So we're still at a Class 2/2X. 90 is a Class 1. So there's little areas we're going to be working on, things that are in control, things that, are an investment. So we'll work on that. When I talk about divergence, I told you I had a slide a little bit later on that, and that's, if you remember, the kind of like, if you got great water, not enough firefighters, or if you have a great fire department, not enough water, and that divergence score has been narrowing. So both water with projects happening, and I'm excited for the North Tank project, excited for 3rd Street, that's going to help our scores. The Station 3, our ability to staff our calls in the future, we're both doing better, and our divergence is narrowing. We're losing less points as we're moving forward. So in 88, right about just prior to when I started, it was we were losing 5.5 points, and we're down to less than a quarter of a point we're losing on this evaluation. So I was pretty happy to see that when I was reviewing that. That's what we prepared. It's a long, detailed report. It takes a long time to put the data together to get it submitted. There is, please don't take any one thing and skew it out of context. It's easy to do that. Overall, we're improving. We want to get better. We want to get that one. I appreciate the outside evaluation of our organization that allows us to really, it's a good critical view of ourselves that we can look at it and see where we can do better. So I want to leave it at that, and I stand for questions.
Thank you, Chief. Councilor Richardson, and then you, Councilor Gabriel.
Thank you very much, and this is great information to have, and it sounds like you all are doing really well. In terms of the staffing, is this, I'm assuming it's not finding enough folks to fill these roles, not necessarily the budget, or is that?
We're going to be doing a deep dive on staffing tomorrow. One of the things I'll mention with staffing is keep in mind that was one component of the operational part. So it was like when we talk about out of 15, that was there's 50 points in the fire analysis. 15 of it was staffing. We got 10.4 something out of that 15. So that left a little area for us to improve in. What they're really looking at, though, is what we got to take into consideration, and I'll talk about this at depth tomorrow, is like we've done some kind of outside the box thinking on trying to help that initial attack staffing with our civilian paramedic program and our provisional driver program. Because what they're looking at is how many firefighters we're putting on that first alarm, and they'll look back over the last this was 6 years, and they'll look at those calls and they'll see, well, they showed up with 12 on this call, they showed up with 8 on this call, and they'll figure out that average. So, they'll look at all of those, and that's how we're trying to creatively, make sure we've got that number increasing in the future. It's through some, not only firefighter staffing, but it's all basically our whole department approach with other programs we're doing also. I don't know if I answered your question.
Mayor, if I could, and Dan
Sure.
touched on this, I would suggest council maybe not spend too much time on going down that topic today, because for your budget work session tomorrow, Dan will be here and we will be talking to you in detail about staffing. And bear in mind, this is only one side of what fire department does, staffing for fire response. And as you well know, we've been struggling intensely for the last 5 to 7 years to adequately staff EMS. So we're going to go all into all that detail tomorrow. And we'll be talking through the budget in a general way about staffing across the city, not just in this department. And then, as you recall, we do have a staffing study that we'll complete later this year. So it's a concern. I see it popping out for you guys as a concern. It's certainly been a concern and will continue to be for us, and we hope to be addressing it in the next year in so much as we have the resources to do that. So we'll go into lots of detail tomorrow.
Thank
Since
you.
we have 2 quality evenings this week together.
Thank you for sensing us headed down a rabbit hole, City Manager. Councilor Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. Chief, I was just curious about the upgrade to the training facility and the rating. We spent millions. Janine, how many millions of sixpenny money?
Dan knows better than I do. It was what, 3.5?
Roughly 3.84.
Yeah. Roughly.
There you go. So many millions on upgrading the training facility. Did that have any impact on the rating? It must have had.
Honorable Mayor, Councilor Gabriel, the use of that facility that facility wasn't even open the back when they were looking at, really, when some years that they were evaluating, the facility was shut down. We didn't have access to a burn building in town because it was tore down. If you remember, some of the timelines projected with the supply chain issue, getting steel in, the project, the length of time expanded out quite longer than was originally planned. That nobody's fault. But everyone did the best they could. It was just getting materials in. It's open now. It will have an effect in the future. It provides us with it will make a difference. But that's not reflected on this one. They understood, I think it affected our scoring. We explained the situation to them. They take everything into account, but we still have to produce those hours. It's very difficult. As Commander Stoneham talked about, throwing ladders, flowing water, that kind of training, we can do out on the ramp some of that. We can do it in neighborhoods. We can't really light fires. We have to have that facility for that, and then doing multi-company training. So that facility will really help us out in that area. And just for recap, it was $3.05 million of SPT money, and then the rest was general fund. So, well.
Councilor Pierce?
Yeah, thank you. Chief Johnson, talk a little bit about the fire station location in terms of getting out into the community and how closely we watch that in terms of how the community is growing. And you mentioned early on about, with the bridge construction and, getting over to West Laramie. And I know we've reserved or kind of plan to hold on to some space near the high school, for a potential other station. And I think years ago I had a conversation with our city manager about, what if we moved this Station 1, a few blocks north, would that, I'm just kind of curious how that plays into this and how closely we follow those or, adapt to the need in the community.
Honorable Mayor, Councilor Pierce, that's a real good question. To get detailed answers takes a real thorough analysis of NFPA standards and run by run. One thing to remember is we're looked at through this ISO study as far as stations and locations to properties and whatnot. But remember, our people are out working in the day, so they necessarily don't respond from a station at night. They obviously respond from the stations, but they also respond from a hydrant at someplace they're testing a hydrant or inspection of a business in town or whatnot. So, and then we have to really separate out data on when you look at run numbers in totality and how many places go to hit a certain address. And one of the errors I seen made on a study once, it was quite a few years ago now, was going to the same place, but it was picking up patients, and it was the hospital. And it's like, well, that's not a response for a So one thing I'll say is and people, this is worth a discussion, and this is worth a discussion for the councilors to be able to talk about, is the addition of Station 3. Now, you mentioned Station 4. I did talk with Director Hunt, and getting land in a place is very difficult once it's all developed. So we talked in the Turner Track, and we did set aside 5 acres back then, quite a while ago. And we know we're a long ways out from like a Station 4, but we had those talks at that time. The importance of the Station 3 isn't necessarily, people, they want to know how much it reduces response time. It reduces response time in our whole community. So, and when I try to explain that, it's like, so people think linearly of like the station to my house is closer, but if you think about it, even reduces response time, say in Station 2's district by the junior high, because before Station 3 opened, Station 2 would be over there covering a call, then you pop another call in Station 2's district, and Station 1's covering there, so that's delaying their, so it's a community, it's a holistic approach. It's not, so it's, I understand what you're saying when you're talking about a specific station in there, and that's important, but what's more important to me is the approach of the amount of resources that's, because it's moving throughout the day. One of the statistics we'll talk about tomorrow night is when you talk about concurrency of calls. I talk about concurrency of calls. So, and one of the things that leads to a high percentage of concurrency of calls for our organization is the length of interfacility transfers. So, but when we have a call going 48, we're right at 50%, like clockwork, there's another call going somewhere. So concurrent calls are happening half the time. So it's a dynamic system with stations backing up other stations. And the fact that Station 3 was our new one exists is actually reduces response time in Station 1 and Station 2's district. And so it's a worthwhile discussion. It helps the whole community. So when a 4 does arrive, that's going to help the whole community. It'll help West Laramie because, you know, it'll keep resources in certain areas. So I don't know if I'm answering your question specifically, but.
Yeah, and I have a follow-up. So during the day, you say they're out doing maintenance, you know, like checking and the hydrants and stuff like that. Do you strategically say, okay, if today is the check hydrant day, we're going to have truck and folks X over in this side of town, and then we're going to have another crew over on the other part of town, and still try to strategically kind of cover the community so not everybody is like in one location? Does that make sense?
Typically when we're all in one location, it's for a training purpose. It's a multi-company drill. It's a training class we're receiving. So when we're out inspecting, they're not all on the same. So they're out. If they're out doing hydrants, they're spread out through. So the districting, we make good efforts to do it, but we ran 4,825 calls last year. So we're so when you have say once in a while we'll end up in a situation where a fire will occur or an EMS call will occur near a station, and the expectation quite possibly didn't get met by the person because they are, well, you know, we're right by the station. It's like, well, that station is out on a transfer, and Station 3 actually had to cover this call. So it's a complex situation. So they're busy. They're busy doing work, but they're also busy on calls. 4,825 calls with a 49% concurrency rate, with multiple calls happening at the same time. So that's the dynamics of the system we run out of 3 stations right now. The training ground is not a staff station. They can respond from there. They can, you know, obviously they've got radio communications. They can drop what they're doing and respond from there. So.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions, Council? Okay, well, thank you, Chief, and Commanders, thank you as well. We'll see you tomorrow, it sounds like, Chief.
My parting comment is I appreciate all the tough questions going to my division heads. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, Council, we're going to go ahead and close that work session, and we will move on to the Police Department Annual Report. Come on up, Chief Brown.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Honorable Mayor, Council. I think we presented the biased numbers report sometime in January, I believe it was, and I was asked a question about the annual report, and I said it was forthcoming. So this is it. I quickly realized after that meeting that maybe I bit off more than I could chew. I had a vision in my mind of what I was looking to accomplish, and absolutely zero graphic design skills to do so. So luckily, we were awarded an intern from the city manager's office on on loan. And I think we kind of confiscated him, so he's been with us for the better part of 2 or 3 months now. So I'm going to introduce him here in a minute. The annual report, I believe, is in front of you guys in its entirety. It's close to 30 pages. So tonight's a synopsis of the annual report. I do encourage you to take a comprehensive look of it. It's a really good idea of what our men and women have done over the last year. I will say that the previous annual report, I believe it encompassed 2020 and 2019, I believe. So this is 2 years in front of that, and this is strictly just for 2022, the work that was done over that year. And we intend on having our annual report annually, and the next one will be on the calendar year of January 2023, give or take a month or two. So I will introduce our intern, Brandon, and I'll let him come up here and introduce himself. And then we'll take any questions you have at the completion of his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Yeah. Brandon, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Honorable Mayor, council members, thank you for having me. As the chief said, I am a city manager's office intern, and I have been working on this report for a little while now. I had a few intentions when making this report. They were to provide relevant information to the Laramie citizenry in a spirit of transparency and making sure that all relevant information is available to the community. And doing so in an aesthetically pleasing way and trying to make it as pretty as one can do. And I'd like to think that I did that, but obviously I'm open to critiques. So we can get right into it. The first half of the annual report includes mainly descriptions of the different divisions, units, and programs within the Laramie Police Department. The 4 divisions that are mainly discussed are the LARC division, which is the Laramie Albany County Records and Communications Center, which is in charge of records keeping, communications, dispatch, all of the important duties they carry out. The Patrol Division, which carries out patrol areas and normal traffic enforcement and other normal patrol police duties. The Police and Community Services Division, which is in charge of several different units and programs, including animal control, professional standards, and recruitment and hiring. And then the Investigations Division, which investigates crimes and includes detectives, 1 lieutenant, and 1 sergeant. And the first half of this report mainly consists of these descriptions. They're more in depth than I have here, and they explain in great detail what programs and which units belong to which divisions. So the hope here was to help educate and inform on all of the different ways the Laramie Police Department works, all the different services provided, and how it is structured. Calls for service are defined in the report and defined here as officer-initiated activity or requests for service by citizens. There were 26,982, so roughly 27,000 calls for service over the 2022 calendar year. There were the 10 most common included in the report. And one thing I failed to mention at the beginning was another intention with this report was to make it accessible and easy to understand for community members that may not necessarily know all of the policing practices, standards, or verbiage. So to try and make that more accessible to the community was an important part. So that all 10 of these calls for service that were provided were defined. A few of the most common were traffic stops with almost 6,000. That was the most common call for service. The next most common was suspicious activity reported either by officers investigating or by citizens. Phone messages, which is a broad category where an officer can follow up on a case. It involves leaving messages, receiving messages. It's very broad, but that was the second most common. Domestic animal calls, pretty much fully fielded by animal control. This is pets mainly, domestic animals, so that was 1,007 calls for service for animal calls, which is off-leash, lost, or pet-related calls for service. And I do have the data for that and a number of other things to discuss at the end if there are questions. Welfare checks, checking in on community members that may need to be checked on to ensure that they are doing well and that they're that they're doing well. VIN inspections, which are carried out by community service officers, which are one of the programs within the patrol division, that was inspecting a VIN's vehicle number when moving in state and trying to transfer that registration. Parking citations, there was a large increase in parking citations. This is the data pulled from the report. There was a 21.5% increase from 2021 in the calendar year to 2022. There was 2,447 parking citations, which is 433 more than the 2,004 citations given in 2021, sorry. This was done partially due to increased community service officer enforcement, and the number will likely increase again going into 2023. The other citation area that was covered in the report was non-parking citations, so moving citations and citations that are outside of the realm of parking. These citations were broken down by racial demographics. The middle pie chart on your page or on the screen are the racial demographics pulled from the April 2020 census, with white members making up around 80% of the population, Hispanic members making up 11% of the population, 4.1% being other, which was a difficult category to define either due to the identity of multiple races, which was not broken down deep enough to provide in-depth percentages and data on that. The overall racial representation of citations given is also provided. White members of the community received roughly 93% of citations, 92.78 to be exact. Black members of the population received 2.14%. Asian or Pacific Islander received 1.05%, Hispanic received 2.04%, Middle Eastern received 0.33%, American Indian or Alaskan Native received 0.62%, and members of the other category received 0.09%. And then finally, there was 1% of citations where there was not racial data gathered, which is reflected as unknown. As well, there is an attachment of the number of citations given by racial demographic. Overall, through racial demographics, white citizens received the most citations at around 93%, which was well above the 80% racial makeup they consist of in Laramie. Use of force data was provided in the report. This is an attempt to try and, in this presentation today, I'm trying to do so in a way that is brief. It is more in depth in the report. There were 62 total incidents of use of force by the Laramie Police Department in the 2022 calendar year, which makes up 0.22% of all calls for service. The majority of uses of force were hands-on or control holds. Hands-on is grabbing and moving an individual. Control holds are manipulating one's limbs or doing other forms of physical manipulation in order to effect an arrest or handcuff an individual. 12 individuals were injured in use of force incidents throughout the course of 2022. Only one of these injuries received during a use of force incident by a citizen ended up in a hospitalization. 8 officers were injured, but none were hospitalized during these use of force incidents. In the report, there is a graphic that shows the entire breakdown of every single use of force and breaks down the entire number of uses of force within 2022 by category, as well as definitions to ensure that everyone knows exactly what those are. For complaint data received during 2022, there were 4 complaints filed internally, and there were 7 complaints filed by citizens. The definitions provided here are the exact definitions provided within the annual report. Substantiated means that it was supported by sufficient evidence and found to be true. Unsubstantiated is did not occur, an employee was not involved, or there is sufficient evidence to prove or disprove the complaint unfounded, is that it was false or not factual, and exonerated occurred, but the department employee acted lawfully and/or was justified. All 4 complaints filed internally within the Laramie Police Department were found to be substantiated. Of these 7, there is a pie chart there that demonstrates all of the different findings of use of force. The numbers don't seem to be, they're just very poor font. My apologies for that. From what I believe was provided, there was 1 report that was substantiated, 1 that was exonerated, and I apologize, I can't read that very well on these screens, but
2 substantiated, 3 exonerated.
oh, sorry. So, as the definitions provide, those were the statistics provided for complaint data. Community engagement was a very important part of the calendar year of 2022, and the Laramie Police Department engaged in numerous community engagement activities throughout the year, one of which was a Shop of the Cop at Walmart, in which members of various law enforcement agencies, including the Laramie Police Department, helped people choose out their holiday gifts and wrap them. And I, looking at the pictures, think they did a really good job. I think the presents looked very well wrapped. There was the community engagement event in which Assistant Chief of Police Robert Terry was a guest barista at the Human Bean. 2 lieutenants as well as Chief of Police Brown were present that day to engage in conversation and for Robert Terry to make a very good cup of coffee. There was Coffee with a Cop at Starbucks, in which the same sort of thing occurred, where numerous officers in the Laramie Police Department, from patrol officers all the way up to command officers, were present in order to engage in conversation and coffee with the community. And then finally, there was Laramie Lemonade Day, which is the annual lemonade day where young people of Laramie all over are creating lemonade stands and practicing their entrepreneurial skills. And during this time, the Laramie Police Department visited quite a few lemonade stands to support these young entrepreneurs, as well as engage in the community in conversation and fun. There were a number of changes coming in 2023 that have either been instituted or will be instituted soon. One of these is the creation of an administrative sergeant position who will assist in different divisions, review alcohol and oversized load permits, and assist with the Chief's Advisory Board. The upgrading of body-worn cameras to the Axon 3, which have increased resolution, audio gathering capabilities, and other very helpful technological advances for these body-worn cameras. These will help in transparency purposes as well as evidentiary purposes to make sure that all policing activities are filmed and recorded to the best of their abilities. The renaming of the Community Services and Policing Division to the Support Services Division, as well as the creation of the Support Services Unit, which will be in charge of community engagement, crime prevention, and the assistance of other divisions with numerous cases. A new recruiting model in which testing will be ongoing, and my apologies for the fidgeting. A new recruiting model that will increase interviews and testing on a as-needed basis and increase the number of testing and interviews being carried out in order to expedite the recruiting and hiring process. A new deployment model which reduces the patrol teams from 6 to 4, as well as reduces 3 shifts to 2 from morning, day, and evening to day and night, as well as increasing shifts from 10 to 12 hours, creating the ability to go 3 days on 1 week and then 4 days on the next week in a bi-weekly schedule, which should help officers have more days off a month. There's the addition of a new contractual background investigator who will carry out background investigations during the hiring process for the Laramie Police Department. And then Bigs with Badges, in which the Laramie Police Department will be partnering with Big Brothers Big Sisters in order to provide mentorship to children that participate in that program, which benefits both the officer and the child, in the officer being able to feel a very reinvigorated feeling of service to their community, as well as being able to provide mentorship to children. Thank you for your time, and I would be very happy to hear any questions, Honorable Mayor and council members.
Thank you, and great job. Council members, any questions? Councilor Shumway.
Thank you. This is certainly much more in-depth than we've ever received before in time I've been on council. You said that there was one hospitalization, probably
Yes.
from a use of force. Just a question, was it a gunshot or was it a taser? What was the reason that the person had to be hospitalized?
Sure, so that specific incident, officers were actually responding to a domestic violence situation. This individual presumably assaulted his significant other and then pointed a gun at a neighbor who attempted to intervene. When officers stopped the individual, he was initially compliant and then began reaching for a firearm that was later found on his driver's seat. At that point, officers deployed, I believe it was 2 less lethal beanbag rounds, and one of the rounds caused some damage, I believe, to the rib cage area. So he was admitted to the hospital and released, I believe, 48 hours later after treatment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Councilor Gabriel?
Thanks, Mayor. I want to go back to use of force. Of all the calls, 62, let's see here, if you can bring that back up. I want to make sure I get these numbers right, but 62.
Just shy of 27,000.
Right, 27,000 calls to your department. You had only 62 complaints on use of force and only 1 substantiated. That's amazing to me.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, council member, if I can make one minor adjustment, it's actually not a complaint. We self-analyze every single use of force. So those 62 use of forces are all self-reported. They're all self-analyzed through multiple layers of the police department. And shortly, we intend to be presenting all of our, or the majority of our use of force situations, including body-worn camera video, to the police review board.
But you have to be very pleased with the lack of substantiation on use of force. I mean, that's amazing to see that number.
It's never easy to follow the fire department, but in this case, where they had an opportunity to talk about some of their training challenges, I can tell you with the utmost confidence coming into this department that one thing that we do really, really well is train our officers on the appropriate amount of use of force to use during situations, and when having the discretion to do so in every use of force situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Pierce?
Yeah, to change the subject a little bit, the community engagement stuff for 2023 looks really exciting. So, and really pretty inventive in your thinking, and I really appreciate that. And I think the more you're out there in the community, I think that's just great, and certainly trust building. So I think it's really important. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and if I could, I will add that the police department that's addressed or analyzed in this report will not be the same police department that you see in 2023. There's been a significant amount of changes, including the community policing team that's forthcoming. We recently selected a sergeant. So we are looking forward to all the things to come, including some of the things mentioned at the end of this slide. So we're excited. And it's not me, it's the men and women that work for me. They're phenomenal, they're innovative. All I try to do is create an environment where they can feel free to share their ideas, and I think it benefits the community because of it.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions, Council? Councilor Doherty?
I was glad to see there's no apparent racial bias as a statistics person. I can tell you that it looks like well within the range. When you have a small population of some minority, then they're going to look underrepresented unless you're really going after minorities. So it was good to see that distribution that wasn't, because there's a perception that the police go after Black and Hispanic people more. So that makes me happy. I'm wondering, is there any way we can gauge class disparity? Like, am I more likely to get pulled over in my Cadillac or in my beater, 1996 red Saturn or something? Is there a way to do that without too much trouble, like what the vehicle is?
Sure.
That would kind of give us an idea if there's any bias, like going after poor people because they can afford the tickets less than others.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can answer, council member, I'll look into that and see if there's any innovative ways out there. None that I'm aware of. I will tell you from my own perspective and experience, it is extremely difficult to determine who's driving behind that wheel before we pull them over. Oftentimes, especially when you're doing speed control or you're watching intersections for red light violations, any violations, stop sign violations, usually you see the violation before you see the individual, and oftentimes you'll even pull the car over before you even have any idea of who's in the car or how many individuals are in the car. So it's very difficult to quantify, but I'll see what I can come up with.
I was thinking the age of the vehicle maybe, because you probably have that, right? If it's something easy to pull, it would be kind of nice to look at. I don't need to see it, I just think it would be nice for you to get an idea, it may be people in older cars have more broken down car problems and anyway, just throwing it out there, thanks.
Councilors, any other questions? City Manager, go ahead.
Mayor, I was a little surprised you guys didn't ask about parking enforcement, so I was ready to tell you what I had told you with respect to the last work session, which is we are planning a work session in early July, I believe, to dive a little deeper into parking enforcement, largely because we fielded a number of questions from councilors that I presume are questions you are fielding from constituents. So we'll dive a little deeper into that in the summer. But I think you saw from the statistics here that enforcement is up, and I think that is mitigating a lot of pervasive issues in certain parts of town. So we'll continue doing that and then tell you a lot more about it this summer.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilor Richardson.
Thank you. Just looking at the number of citation, actually now this may not be a real relevant question. I just noticed that they had gone down from 2021 to 2022, but it's such a small number that I am going to just stop talking. Never mind.
Thank you, Councilor. Vice Mayor.
I just wanted to make a comment to the chief. I know that you've been going out within the community and doing meet and greets and trying to get to know people and people to get to know you. And I just wanted to say that in conversations with a number of constituents that I have, that has been mentioned. And I think it's been really appreciated and recognized and noticed. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I would echo that.
Thank you.
Sure. Council, any other questions? All right, Chief, I would leave you with Councilor Newman's point to the fire department. Thank the folks that work for you. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you. And if I may have one more thing, Mr. Mayor?
Of course.
I just wanted to take a moment to thank Brandon. He is graduating in the next couple weeks and looking for employment. He desires to work in city government, and ultimately he strives to be a city manager, which is a tough job. So. But I just wanted to publicly thank you for your work on this. There were many evenings where I came up with an idea and I would come in the next morning and say, hey, can we do this? And he looked at me awkwardly multiple times, but he never said no. And ultimately, I think everything and more that I asked, he accomplished. So thank you for your time and your dedication. We appreciate it. And we look forward to working with you the next couple of weeks. Thank you, Chief.
I would echo that as well. Thank you. Yeah.
Honorable Mayor and Council, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to piggyback on that and just let council know that, thank you, Mayor, sorry, I jumped in. But Brennan is also doing some research for me related to human rights bodies or commissions to sort of augment what we did a few years ago. And so even when he's gone in the fall, we will likely discuss this, but that legacy he will be leaving with our organization on that side as well. Thanks, Brennan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Councilor Pierce.
So with a graduate degree, like an MPA you're graduating, or excellent, thank you. Good luck to you.
Vice Mayor.
I'm only halfway through your report, but I do want to say it's very readable. And the way that you've arranged the information and divided it, it's just very readable. So I think you did a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council Member.
Well, thank you. I'll leave it at that. We sure appreciate it. And this is a very, it's detailed but easy to process. And as like Councilor Shumway said, more information than we're used to receiving in these reports, and that's appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, Honorable
And
Mayor.
good luck. Good luck. Okay, with that, Council, we will close that work session. Move on to council updates and comments. You want to just go around? Councilor Gabriel, start there. We'll head around with updates and comments. Go ahead and just have them both at once.
Thank you, Mayor. In order to get a better understanding of our discussion on 9th Street, Sam Farstead and I took a little tour last week, and it was so much information during the work session that I wanted to see it visually, what was going on 9th Street from Ivinson to Lewis, and it really put it all in perspective to me. And so I wanted to thank Sam publicly for taking time, and it makes a lot of sense when you get out there and see it firsthand. And so a great tour, and that is all I have.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Richardson.
Thank you. The city manager and I and Nancy as well met with the DDA to kind of just talk through their roles and responsibilities as a committee, and I think that was a very helpful discussion. And they had a meeting tonight and are really thinking about the plan that has been in place and how they might utilize that or update it slightly for moving forward as a committee. And then actually have Main Street this Friday, so nothing to report there. Public art, sorry.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Newman, anything on your end?
I have nothing since I was gone all last week, so.
Great. Well, we're glad you're back. Vice Mayor?
The Planning Commission has been moving forward with their review of both the economic development plan as well as the CAP plan. And they've really spent a lot of time going through it. And I think the one thing that I'd like to say is that I'm recognizing and observing a good bit of coordination between the city, our planning commission, and the county, and that our planning commission frequently checks in about the planning division's communication with the county, and that has been part of the ongoing discussions. And they have worked collaboratively on some of the kind of minor editorials together, but I think when it finishes that we will have the same plan. And that seems to be something that they are moving forward. So, and our new member of the Planning Commission, Dr. O'Toole, in his second week, seems very comfortable. And so they had a very active session yesterday.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. One update from me, Councilor O'Doherty and I, the city clerk and city manager, have been discussing opportunities, I should add solid waste as well in that, but discussing opportunities to provide a little more hands-on education with residents about how to properly recycle. And two of those conversations are sort of event-based. One of them would be at Freedom Has a Birthday. The other would be at, I don't remember which farmers markets we settled on, but one farmers market a month, having council members there. So this is your cue to send an email to volunteer. But there to really help folks make sure their recycling is actually recyclable before it goes in the bins, and really just standing there as sort of a, gatekeepers to recycling, but really just there to help folks recycle better. And then we have those products that the city clerk showed us last week, available for folks as well. So, city clerk.
Mayor, just to offer you the specific dates that we asked them for was July 28th, August, the first 2 weeks in August. So we have July 28th, August 4th, and August 11th for farmers market.
Thank you, City Clerk. And we did have, I think I said Freedom Has a Birthday. That would be the first event, obviously, when you're looking at this calendar. So if you have time at those farmers markets, we can help each other out so none of us have to spend our entire time doing that and can buy peaches and things. So we will, Councilor O'Doherty and I will continue working on that, but we'll have stuff funneled through to you all. Asking for help. Councilor Pierce, to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I don't have any updates, but would certainly be more than happy to volunteer for some of these events. So just send me, just pencil me in wherever you need me. So thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Your Honor. City manager and I went to Pinedale this last month, and I will say this. City of Laramie has a large presence now at WHAM at these regional meetings, and it's I think we have a voice which we hadn't had in the past, and it's very meaningful. I think we work mostly on strategy, on how to make municipalities more relevant, and that was a great discussion. And I will say this, one of their goals, and this is something I think will happen, was to bring all 99 municipalities, communities within the state of Wyoming into WHAM. Right now we're at 98. We need one more. And they're doing some, Rock Springs. And they're meeting with their mayor. They're inviting them to WHAM summer conference. And I think it will happen. And then we'll be totally united. But it was a good conference. I always appreciate the wisdom and the input that our city manager brings. And I think they recognize that too by making her a part of the board of WHAM.
Thank you, Councilor. I didn't know the city manager was now a part of the WHAM board. Congratulations, city manager. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll clarify. The city managers and administrators have a seat on the board, so I'm representing that group.
Well, excellent.
Professional folks. They also have a seat on the board for city clerks. And then, of course, the rest are elected officials. So I try to mind my manners and think like a city manager and represent my colleagues appropriately.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you, city manager. That's great. And I appreciate you and Councilor Shumway both giving your time to that. It is important and meaningful, and we sure appreciate it as a council. Councilor O'Doherty.
So speaking of WHAM, last week when I said I could be the backup, I forgot that I'm launching on a river trip that has been in the works since November, getting the permit. So someone else will have to be the backup if we can have a backup.
Sorry, Councilor. We already resolved.
Maybe we can resolve something different. Erla has been informed that Aaron is a slacker. And then the other issue is for the recycling. We also talked with Charles, who is our new recycling manager for solid waste, and he is going to get us a banner and some magnets, and we have some brochures. So that'll be cool. And that'll be better than digging in the trash and the recycling and having to separate. We're just going to try to go to the right thing right at the start. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then and Councilor Gabriel and I did some trash pickup this weekend out by the covered by the city springs. It was like, you kept saying, oh my, like every time we get to, so it's just like, I can't believe how much stuff gets blown in there. And then the Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities met last Thursday, and mostly we had our training from the city clerk about open meetings and Public Records Act, but we also talked about Freedom has a birthday, so they'll have a booth there and a booth at Pride Fest to probably do the obstacle course or something like that, or so, disability awareness. And Sam Burkett called me today. He's stepping down from the Disabilities Council, so that's sad, but I also understand he's got a lot going on. So if you know people that are familiar with disability issues, it would be good to encourage them to apply. And we're down to one guy on the whole council or commission, so it would be nice to try to diversify that way too. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Somerville?
A couple of things regarding Town and Gown. A reminder, you guys all have an invitation into your inbox for the groundbreaking ceremony for the dorm project on Thursday. If anybody is around, they have invited all of us to attend. The International Town Gown Association Conference will be held this year in Fort Collins. So there is a contingent, Todd, I think, or Janine, maybe, Janine, myself, folks from UW, LCCC, WowTech, and, oh yeah, and Chief Brown, are all the entities are going down to the Town Gown Conference in Fort Collins. Let's take a look at what is going on, what are the issues, and what are the creative solutions. And then on the airport board has received back its first list of comments from the rules and regulations that were proposed, kind of in the vein of a conversation we had last week, but those comments are extensive in terms of the rules and regulations. So the board is going to begin that process of starting to go through it, deciding if they want to make changes before they proceed with adoptions of the rules. If the board decides to make substantial changes to that document, then they need to go out for another public comment period and continue to repeat that process and repeat that process and repeat that process until they come to a document that they're not making substantial changes to before they can proceed with finalization of those rules.
Yeah, so they also hired a consultant group, right, to help with this, or is that something else?
That, I believe, is something else. I know that they've been working with, and I allow the city manager to correct me if she has different information, but for the rules pieces, they have been working and reviewing and researching what the other airports in the region were. Yeah, they use a different resource to pull these rules together, and some help from the FAA and a few other places.
Thank you.
Anything else, Councillor?
No, I think that's it.
Excellent. All right, thanks, everybody. We will move on to, City Manager, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to share with you a fun thing I got to do last week, but it involves this front space of City Hall. And the Laramie Public Art Coalition has put out a call for public art to be staged in the front of our building here in generally what is the area of the planter, just right out here. So they had 18 proposals, and I was asked to sit on the review committee. We were able to narrow that down to 4 artists who will be invited to create design to fill this space with some public art. So that's exciting, and it looks like the process will take many months. I believe we'd be making a selection in maybe September, potentially. So it's a ways out, but I just wanted to let you know that that was fun for me, and it will be a nice addition to City Hall.
Thank you, City Manager. And I assume if there are council members who have not participated in a selection panel, maybe talk to Councilor Richardson, but the Public Art Coalition would likely love to have you.
I'll also just note that I was reviewing some grants today in my day job, and LPAC is frequently noted in Main Street as the resource for other entities around the state to utilize their resources and their expertise, and is shown as like the example. So.
Well, that's great to hear. Thanks for sharing that. Councilors, any other comments, updates before we move on to the agenda? Okay. You'll see we do have a couple proclamations and then a few public hearings, so maybe a little bit of time up front, as well as our staff recognition. And then we will move through that. But any questions on the consent agenda that anyone has? Yeah, Councilor Pierce, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Regarding the May 30th ward meetings, I'm wondering, because Councilor O'Doherty and I had a discussion, and I'm trying to recall what exactly transpired. Do you remember? Go ahead.
I was saying it might make better sense to have a council listening session here and let people come in instead of having to divide our staff at 3 different places, and then we don't have necessarily the right answer for constituents. Just have the time when the public can just talk to us. You know, everything on the agenda, it's just, we're listening. So that was my idea.
And I think, can I just?
Please.
Yeah, and I just think it's a great idea. We also talked about potentially engaging in different topics, but I'm not so sure if that is the right approach, because we don't want to limit, right? But we still want to maybe throw out suggestions for topics. So anyway, I think it might be a halfway decent alternative to our ward meetings, and I thought I'd just maybe throw it out there for a discussion and a potential cancellation, because I think getting something like that together by May 30th might be a push, but just for future thoughts with other council members.
I certainly have some thoughts on that, but I think maybe we'd be better served to have some variety of work session on what we're going to do with our 5th Tuesdays. And, you know, I guess maybe I don't want to take up too much time. Like, I'm not sure this is the right moment for that conversation, right?
That's what I was thinking, we could just cancel.
Yeah.
And then get it on a calendar for a work session.
Discuss.
I'm certainly okay with that if the rest of the council is. I know it's been a bit contested in the past. There's been a bit of a split. When asked during the agenda meeting, I said, I don't know. I'm fine with not having it, but I think council might want to have it. So if that has changed, we can go ahead and cancel this one and see if we can have a work session before the next 5th Tuesday about reevaluating the plan. So, Councilor Gabriel?
Last time Councilor Shumway and I showed up, we had one person that came late to the meeting, and we were just kind of talking with Assistant Manager Todd for a long time. And then somebody came in and we talked a little bit, kind of small talk, really.
Sure.
It was a little bit city related. The time before, we had one person on Zoom. And it was, you know, it was all right, but one person, that was it. So, yeah, I tend to agree that I'm not sure it's really serving the public that well.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that the point is that we want to hear from residents in you know, maybe a less stiff way than standing there, right? And so I can appreciate a need for a bigger conversation, but if folks aren't showing up, I mean, I think Ward 1 last time had a pretty robust conversation.
Very.
I mean, I had to make a list of topics that we were going to discuss, and we just went around the room and everybody threw stuff at us, you know, metaphorically. And but it's hit and miss, for sure.
I think the conversations that we had in Ward 1 that the other wards would have benefited from.
Right.
It was robust, it was engaging, and so possibly
Okay.
the type of format that we're considering is worth thinking about.
City manager, would we be able to schedule a work session sometime before the following 5th Tuesday, not May 30th, but then? Okay. Well, council, let's go ahead and do that then. We can request a work session at our next meeting, but we'll pull that off for this round.
So Mayor, just to be clear, we're going to add cancel to this item.
Sure, yes, that would be that's what I'm hearing. Okay, yes, that's what we're doing.
Cancel the 30th?
The 30th,
And the next one's in August.
yes, I believe that's, that,
And advertised at all?
We have not advertised yet because the
Okay.
council hasn't said it for certain yet. So we can go ahead and notice the public
thank you.
you're canceling.
Councilor Shumway, that was a great question. Okay.
Your Honor, I don't have a problem with that. It's Memorial Day weekend too, right? And I want to have that discussion. I have some ideas on why we should keep the ward
Okay.
separate, but let's wait until we have that discussion.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Councilor, and I suspect it'll be a robust conversation. I think we all have some opinions, and we should work through it. I mean, it's a well-intended idea, so figure out the best way. All right, we're going to cancel that. We're going to move on then to regular agenda stuff, unless anybody else has a question on the consent. Last chance on the consent. City Clerk?
Sorry, Mayor.
You're
Not
fine.
on consent, but for your regular agenda.
Yeah, sure, we'll move on and head right to you.
We did get a request this afternoon from Assistant City Manager Feeser to add a resolution for a grant submission for EV charging.
Okay.
It is due before May 30th, so it
Okay.
needs to be on this agenda in order for us to meet the deadline.
Okay, thank you, City Clerk. Would you put that towards the front of the agenda as we work on it? I mean, up there with the other contracts and things that are timely? Would that be okay?
Well, he was,
I'm sure we'll get
I
through it,
think
but.
because of the dollar amount, it's a $300,000.
Oh, I just meant up towards the top of the regular agenda.
Oh, sure,
You know,
yeah.
item 12 or something, 13, somewhere in that range.
Absolutely.
Just to make sure we don't get in a pinch. Thank you, City Clerk. Anything else on the regular agenda? Councilor Shumway.
Your Honor, Brett Glass brought up something that did not receive any discussion, and I think it's because he said we need to include FedEx, UPS, and others that can leave handbills or reminders for failure to deliver or something like that. And I don't think it was addressed, and I don't know if it's anything that's necessary, but I think we did not include this, and we're moving now into the third reading, third and final. I think it needs to at least receive some discussion if it's needed.
Yeah, and Councilor Shumway, I had asked that that item end up on the regular agenda so that we could have further conversation on for that and other reasons. And what struck me, and I think we should discuss it, but FedEx doesn't leave things on your car, right? And that would be, and so, but I guess I would like, maybe, I think you're right, maybe we should have a little clarification from staff on.
Private property, so
Yeah. So City Manager, does that question make sense to you, to maybe have that
Yeah.
addressed?
Yeah, it does. Council, as you know, that section of code addresses leaving things on private property homes and also private property vehicles. And our proposed change is only to the vehicle section. And I heard Mr. Glass's read as well, and he's reading it in its entirety and looking at the homes. If that's something you'd like to amend, I can send a note to Bob and ask if he, from the standpoint of the city attorney, thinks we should pursue an amendment to that section.
Okay, thank you.
I guess as I'm thinking out loud, if I could, Mayor, I would almost wonder if we're going to amend the House piece of leaving handbills, maybe that should come as a separate reading and 3 readings, because we're on third
Yes.
reading. So if we amend on third reading, then the public will not have had time to comment upon those changes
Yeah.
to houses. So that
And I
would
think it's a
probably be
bigger
better
conversation,
practice.
right? We wouldn't
Yeah.
want FedEx to just leave their advertisements stuck to our door every day, right? Like if it's, oh, you missed a package, it's fine. But, so it's a bigger conversation. I think you're right. Let's have a second conversation about it.
And just to that one, when looking at that, I read through it last time, and it was a little bit difficult to delineate from the house versus the car in this, if I remember correctly. But maybe that was my reading, so I'll go back and read it again. That might be something bring up.
And council, I would say on item 14, you should expect an email with a little bit of a heads up on what that item is from the city attorney before the meeting. It's an exciting opportunity for us to meet one of our goals, but if you have any questions, that's where you're headed for that one. So any other questions on this? I believe the Sundance Hill plat, we're going to end up look at a postponement again, but we had postponed it to the specific date, so we have to hear it again today or next week. So there it is, but we will have something more vague, I think, this go around for the postponement. So unless anybody else has any questions, Councilor O'Doherty.
I have a question. I had it tentative for May 17th work session. Is that still?
Okay.
That's on the works, okay.
Yes.
I'll be on the river.
To be on the river.
So I will have to watch the reruns.
It's like you're trying to make us all feel bad, Councilor.
Yeah, she's bragged about it twice
Yeah.
now.
All right. Any other questions, Council? Okay. Thanks, everybody. We are adjourned.